Hi everybody, Dan Illman here for Weekend Wrap, taking a look back at last Saturday's Grade 1 Santa Anita Sprint Championship, an important win-and-you're-in prep race for the Breeders' Cup Sprint. An important race because it featured last year's Breeders' Cup Sprint winner, Roy H. They break from the gate in this short field, and Roy H's uncoupled stablemate, Distinctive B, is going to go to the early lead. Roy H, the number 2, is now going to be eased to the outside, and he is going to find a very comfortable rhythm under Paco Lopez sitting in third. The main competition for Roy H, the horse that defeated him in the Bing Crosby Stakes back at Del Mar on July the 28th, is the number 5 Ransom the Moon, who's at the back of the pack. And when Ransom the Moon won the Bing Crosby, he got a big pace to attack, and that was certainly not the case in the Santa Anita Sprint Championship. They are not going fast in this race, and this race came over a course that seemed to favor speed. There was not a lot of closing over the main track at Santa Anita on Saturday. Paco Lopez confidently looking for Ransom the Moon. He's attacking the overmatched pace horses now turning into the stretch, and he's going to try to float Ransom the Moon out just a little bit turning into the lane. But this tactical advantage that Roy H has, too much for Ransom the Moon, and this is the Roy H that trainer Peter Miller and his connections want to see. Straight and strong and powerful, getting the Santa Anita Sprint Championship victory for the second year in a row. Ransom the Moon plugs on late. He's not going to catch Distinctive B, but I believe he was pace compromised, and he galloped out very well after the fact. Roy H, as the even money favorite, returns $4, keying a Peter Miller exacta that returns $13.80 for a buck. A lot of folks wondered if Roy H was still the same Roy H. He had not won a race since the February Palos Verdes, but it's not like he ran terribly in his 2 starts since then. An excellent third in the Dubai Golden Shaheen, and then returning from Dubai a second in the Bing Crosby when he made the first run into that fast pace that benefited Ransom the Moon. He's closing in on $2 million in lifetime earnings for Peter Miller, Paco Lopez, and the owners Rockingham Ranch and David Burnson. And this son of More Than Ready, it just looks like he's coming into the Breeders' Cup Sprint off a similar pattern as last year. A second in the Crosby, a win in the Santa Anita Sprint Championship with a 106 buyer. The Crosby last year was a 98. This year, he comes into the Breeders' Cup off a 96 buyer in the Crosby, a 105 buyer in the Santa Anita Sprint, and you got to think he's ready to peak now in his second start off a little bit of a layoff and his third start back from Dubai. Now he'll have to face Imperial Hint, who is the East Coast's best sprinter at Churchill Downs. He'll also have to face Ransom the Moon, who might be a sneaky long shot play in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. You have to believe that the pace is going to be faster in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, more contested, over a fairer racetrack. We know those West Coast tracks like Santa Anita tend to favor speed. It did seem to favor speed last Saturday. Ransom the Moon just really didn't have a chance the way the track and race shape played out. For him to finish an okay third and gallop out well, I think it heartens the connections. Trainer Phil D'Amato and jockey Flavian Pratt for the Breeders' Cup Sprint at a nice price. He's proven that he can beat Roy H in the past. Miller's also said that Distinctive B might show up in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, and while he ran perfectly fine, this 7-year-old was in for a $40,000 tag a couple of starts back. I think he was helped by the track and the slow pace. He ran very well to finish second, but the Breeders' Cup Sprint is going to be a different story with a lot more burners likely signed on and a lot different race scenario. But Roy H, how can you complain? A really rock-solid prep. I think a perfect prep to get him primed for the Breeders' Cup Sprint and his showdown with Imperial Hint. And keep an eye out for Ransom the Moon as perhaps a long shot play in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, getting a better pace scenario.